Welcome to the Au Jus. I'm your host, Beef Loaf. This show is being powered by From the 108 and FromThe108.com, where you can get all of our content, top to bottom, blogs, podcasts, and videos, including the world-famous Sunday Soak. You can also get all of our merch there, including the infamous Wave Sucks and hashtag 108 Garbs. Currently, we have a Wake Me for the Parade koozie selling at FromThe108.com. It's $5. Go get one, go get 10 of them. It's the kind of thing that never goes out of style. This show is being powered by you, the loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely do super chats because that's how we get paid, and that's how we bring you the content you know and love. Tonight's guest. He's the owner and operator of the Broadcast Basement, which is an on-demand radio network. But most of you listeners know him as the host of the Sox In The Basement podcast, which airs twice weekly. He's also appeared on the 108 podcast numerous times and a bunch of variety-style shows that the 108ers have hosted. And lastly, he has done you all a favor by punching Third Eye Blind lead singer Stephen Jenkins in the face. My guy, Chris Lanuti, welcome to the Au Jus, my friend.
I mean, it's like, do you pull up the worst picture you have of anybody?
That's kind of the bit. I want it to be ridiculous. I had this one, but it didn't cover you up good enough. So, you're too much hanging out. Now, that picture I really liked, but this one, because it's blurry and ridiculous, then I had to go with it. I couldn't stop myself.
That other one is I went to C2E2 with my 17-year-old daughter.
Oh, nice.
That's what she wanted for Christmas this year. She wanted to go to C2E2. I'd never been there before. And she's in the cosplay, and she dresses as like some weird anime character. Like, she dressed as some character that people came up and took pictures with her because she completed the set. And like nobody else was dressed as this character. That's what she does, the most obscure thing. And then she's like, "You have to dress up," and I'm like, "No, I'm not dressing up." We had a big argument about it. And all I have are these Chewbacca pajamas and a Stone Cold vest that I got from back in the day when I was interviewing all the WWF people when they were called WWF. That's how long ago.
Yeah, right.
I had a WWF Stone Cold vest, and I was like, "So I'll wear both of them," and then that's what I went as. And she thought it was hysterical. Like, she was like, "That's my dad." And people kept complimenting me on it, like I wasn't just dressed as an a-hole. Like, I mean, like that.
they appreciated the effort. They gave you the effort there, you know. And then
here's the other funny thing about that. I was like the guy amongst all the nerds. And I'm a big Star Wars nerd. I'm a nerd in a lot of ways. Okay. I played the marching band for Brother Rice. I'm a giant nerd.
Hello. What an admission.
Yeah. First chair. But, okay. I like the amount of times that I just took advantage of the fact that nobody was going to stop me. Like, she wanted to go see the reunion of all the Clone Wars voice actors.
Yeah.
For an hour beforehand, they said they weren't letting anybody else in and it was locked off. And I just walked her to the front door and pretended we had gone out to the bathroom for a minute. And they I stuck her into every symposium. I just walked up like, "Were you here earlier?" Of course I was.
Yes, sir.
I'm tricking everybody in that place.
I respect that very much. And some of good dadding is just the effort.
Yeah.
Just the fact that you were willing to dress up. I mean, you were showing out there as dad skills. My Sox Summer can learn from you, as he always likes to blame his kids for everything. I wanted to find out, how's the Broadcast Basement going? We haven't talked in a little bit. How's the network?
You know what? It's going really good. I mean, it's going strong enough that I now have a social media manager who handles things for me, and she's great. And like, I don't if you send me a DM, she probably reads it first.
Okay.
And if you're angry with me, she responds to you. Like, I really upset the Blue Island Chamber of Commerce 2 weeks ago with Southside Pod.
Okay.
With some jokes that were made about Blue Island. And we make fun of everybody. We make fun of Alsip. We make that show covers all the suburbs. But the Blue Island Chamber of Commerce person was very upset. And she, before I even read the thing, had sent like the most professional, like, "We're going to look at this and we're going to evaluate ourselves and we're going to sit back and think real hard about what we said." And I was laughing when I was like, "Man, I wouldn't have written that at all."
I was going to ask, how long until you tell her, no, we need something harsher in this response?
She handled it very well. But I mean, like, that's the thing. It's like, I have somebody who's professional, because I really don't like being professional. Like, I always had a program director that would sit there and say, "You have to apologize." And I'd be like, "I'm not apologizing for anything." And then, so like, it's nice to have that one person now in the organization. It's like, I don't know, Chris, maybe we should make everybody angry with us. So But I mean, like, yeah, it's going good. I mean, Southside Pod's blowing up. Sox in the Basement somehow doing well during the way that the White Sox are playing.
Yeah, tough sledding.
I think we strike a nerve, and we always have, with the being, saying everything. Like, I'm never afraid to be like, and you guys do the same thing too. Like, there's certain shows I'm not afraid to just throw whoever needs to be thrown under the bus. Like, I never want to work for the White Sox, so I don't care if they like me. So, I mean, so I think we strike that chord. It's going well. The one that we do out at Evergreen Park is good. We're getting huge numbers in Pittsburgh with Bucks in the Basement on the network.
They're on fire. Yeah, I mean, I was realizing that again because I knew that you worked on that one too, like from a while back. You've been doing that for how many years, Chris?
3 years.
3 years. Okay.
Bucks in the Basement's 5, and Bucks in the Basement's 3 now. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it's finally big enough. It's finally to the size of what Sox in the Basement was when it was really starting to like sell advertising and stuff like that. Because
that's great.
It's very hard to put a show together with a fan base that kind of forgets the Pirates even exist because
right.
the Steelers are everything. But I mean, they're good right now, and so it's kind of fun to watch that grow.
Well, they also had the Bob Nutting shirts where they were making fun of him, and there's a picture of a guy with his arm around the owner, like with the shirt on, and like they're like where we're gonna be in a couple of years. I think the Sox fans are starting to get there. They had already kind of forgotten about the team at this point. So I'm unless there's a seat change, it's a possibility we go down that road.
I think White Sox fans can learn a little bit, just like they can learn a little bit from us. White Sox fans can learn a little bit from what other fan bases are doing. The uprising in Oakland right now is amazing. That they just, I mean, like the concerted effort to put a sign everywhere. Like there's too many signs saying sell the team for them to rip down, and the fans are marching. Like, what are you gonna do? You gonna lock up all your fans on television? Like, that's the thing. It's always like 3 guys that hold the sign. If there were 300, they wouldn't really be able to stop you. I mean, they could stop a fight in the stands. How are they going to get all the signs down? And so, like, I think Sox fans could learn from that, and they could learn from the brashness of somehow getting yourself next to the owner with a sell the team shirt and pointing at it while you put your arm around him. Like, White Sox fans, step up a little bit. You're lagging behind.
That's what it is. We got to learn. We got to learn from these other ones. You're right, Chris. We're not quite there yet, but I appreciate the ballsiness, if you will, of a Pittsburgh Pirates fan there. Let's get to a couple drinks here. Schluss Pappy says, "Oh, thanks for continuing to put in the work level of the content. Cheers." And then also Senor Sox with a drink. He said, "Sox are back. Nobody wants to play them right now." I agree. I was at that game yesterday. Froze my tits off out there, and it was worth every second, even though I was still shivering at 8 p.m. under a bunch of blankets. So it was a good win.
That was a fun win. That was, it was fun to watch them come back. Those are the kind of wins that you're going to get in a season that overall isn't good, but it's gonna give you a great memory. I mean, I can remember great wins. I remember there was a season, I want to say in 07. 07 it happened. Definitely happened in 07. 07 I watched Scott Podsednik come up with 2 outs and a runner on first and lay down a bunt. And the third baseman threw the ball over first base. And the tying run, which was on first with 2 outs, comes around and score. And Scotty Pods comes all the way around for an inside the Parker, which really isn't.
Yeah, the Little League inside the Parker.
They overthrow third trying to get him at third, and then he comes home. And it's one of those memories that, one, is great and amazing, and I always remember it. 2, I always think to myself, like, I almost made like the biggest error of my life. It was the first time I'd ever taken my 2-year-old daughter, my oldest now, who's 17. And I was in the 300 level in the first row with her in my lap. And when the celebrating was over, I thought to myself, did I just hang her over the side?
You're like Michael Jackson with his kids hanging over.
Michael Jackson, my kid, like over a meaningless baseball game for a team that's going nowhere. Like and I always remember that.
No, you're right. Those seasons do breed that. And we were Treasy and I were talking on the last 108 podcast. Like at some point, people are going to stop being mad and transition into, hey, just enjoy today's game. Maybe today's game will be fun. Maybe like in 2018, Jose Abreu hit for the cycle. Hey, that's a fun game. This team stinks, but this is fun. Like that, maybe that approach. So we'll see. I'm still holding out hope. I still have a lot of money bet on White Sox futures that is dwindling down to nothing. So I'd like to hold on to hope for a little bit.
You want to bet me on the White Sox making the postseason? I'm happy to take your money.
You'll make book. You're happy to make book on me.
Just let me know. I'll book it up for you, okay? And listen, no matter how much you come to accept this, don't accept the front office being in power.
Never.
The pressure of that group all leaving should never stop. And the pressure to have Jerry Reinsdorf sell the team should never stop, no matter how much fun you're having on a July day where you're just out there to have fun.
I totally agree. And the 108ers were real early on being up Rick Hahn's ass, even kind of in the early days of the rebuild, like stuff we thought wasn't going right, or not the ways he didn't think he was preparing this team to become a really good team, the lack of development in the minors. I mean, even just watching no one pop up, nothing popped up. Like there's a lot there, and yeah, no one should take the heat off of any of them. You can still enjoy your team in bits and pieces, but you should still be angry, venomous at those people that are causing you, keeping you from a championship.
There you go. I like that. You just summed up White Sox fandom and how you should act for the next several months. All right, everybody pour a beer and let's get to it. More signs at the ballpark, okay? More cheap signs, okay? Yeah. That's what I want. Who cares if they take them down? More cheap signs.
Absolutely. Let's get to one more drink. And this is Shane Spagnoli says, salute, fellas. And he still owes Chris a drink for introducing him from the 108 3 years ago. That's right. I like to hear that when there's crossover amongst the groups.
Oh, yeah. I like shit.
People here
stop over and me a cork and carry at the park a few times.
All right, I want to get into something. You've started a new podcast. It's actually behind the paywall. It's called Podcasting for a Living, and I got the image up here, right here on for the YouTube viewers. I'm really enjoying the hell out of it. $5.99 a month. It's you and Ed, either together or separately, breaking down different aspects of doing podcasting as a business. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what are you trying to communicate here? What's the goal of this? What's the thesis on putting this podcast together?
Well, when I started doing the network, and I came up with the idea 5 years ago of if I was going to try to podcast to make money, I wanted it to be eventually something I could do as a business. I loved radio. I really enjoyed doing live radio. It was my passion. It's my first love of all of my careers and always will be. But radio's dying if it's not dead already. And I was never going to get back into it. And when I left, I could kind of see that it was falling apart. And I said, well, yeah, I got to get a real job and something with a pension maybe. And I got to support these kids and I got to pay this mortgage. And I don't want to move every 2 years from one town to another town or worry about some kind of turnover and then hoping that I can slide into another station. I just didn't want to do that. And so I had gotten out of radio and I had been working for the Cook County Sheriff's Police. I was a 911 dispatch supervisor. At the end, I was a dispatcher for many years. And I did that. And then I was at a point where I could leave and take a partial pension if I wanted to start a company. And I was at a crossroads and I wanted to do it. And I just started coming up with how would I do this? And I looked at how people were doing podcasting. I said, well, first of all, you can't just, it's like a pipe dream to do one show and make enough money to support your family. So I came up with the idea of just like small town radio, I would do small podcast. I would go after specific target audiences. And the EP podcast for Evergreen Park was the first iteration of that. And Southside Pod is structured very much like that. And other shows on the network are structured like that. Sox in the Basement was a happy accident. It honestly
yeah.
It was a happy accident because I told myself, okay, the EP podcast, this is the idea, is these small little, local things.
Sure.
Where, like in Evergreen Park, there's 7,000 households and we're touching 3,500 of them a month. I mean, that's
crazy
in a radio market.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
That's why you can't buy advertising on it. You're on a waiting list and you have been now for years. And I can sell locally to people that want, because those businesses, it's very hard to target in this metropolitan area, a very small area.
Right.
So that, that was the one that I wanted to make sure worked. So I said, well, I got to start another one just to make sure I remember how to start podcasts, because I,
right.
Messing around with it since 2008. So in 2018, I started Sox in the Basement as I'll just talk about the White Sox and make sure I know how this works. And then people just kind of liked it and it kind of came along. But now, right now, I think we're 9 or 10 podcasts that I consider to be working podcasts on the network. I'm involved in half of them.
Okay.
The other half are people that, are part of the network and I'm either doing production or consulting for them or helping them out. But I've gotten to a point now where I get asked a lot of questions all the time. Well, how did you do this? How did you make it so that you could, work in your basement before it was stylish after COVID and everybody was doing it?
Right. That's right.
And trust me, like if I knew my wife was going to be working in the house every day for the rest of my life, because they still haven't taken her back because
Okay.
it's worth it to the bank that she works for to take her back. If I knew that, I would have built a studio in another location. You're not meant to be with the same person 24 hours a day, 7 days. I put a lock on my own door.
It's a little separation. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So, but
I mean, key to a happy marriage. You're giving great marriage advice here, Chris. Just you need to have some separation. That's a given. That's what
if she sees you every day, she doesn't miss you. She needs to miss you a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
I need to miss her every once in a while.
The heart grows fonder, baby. That's what it is.
Right. So, but the thing is, I went to Chicago Podcast Day a little bit over a year ago, and I was invited by James Van Azela to talk about like what I did. And I was up there on a panel with a couple other people that were trying to talk about how they make money, and all of them just basically were able to find like one sponsor. And I broke down like how I do these multiple shows in multiple areas and sell these things like radio ads, and this is my price point, and this is how I do things. And when it was over, they delayed the next chat because everybody wanted to come up and like give me a card. And then I started getting all these phone calls of like, well, and I'm not a genius. Like, trust me, I learn a new thing every day. But I seem to have found something that nobody else was doing it in that way, you know?
Right.
And when you get asked enough times, you sit there and you say to yourself, well, I'm a businessman. If you really want to learn how to do it, pay me. And so that podcast is. I mean, I went and spoke at Columbia College. They have downtown in Chicago. They have a podcasting class. And I got brought down there to speak with the students. And I learned very quickly that everybody else that gives them advice on how to do podcasting tells them like, oh, you know, you want to be worldwide and you want this and everything else. And then I did the other way and explained to them how. When I was done, their instructor, Dan Levy, who is big in Chicago radio, he's been in all these different stations, and he's their professor over there. He goes, you know, we've had a lot of other people come in here and tell you to be big and be everywhere and everything else like that, but none of them are making any money. It's
like this is theoretical. Yeah.
Chris is here and he's going to charge his lunch to his business because it's an expense. Like, I mean, like there's a difference between them and what Chris is doing. And I think that kind of got me to the point where I said, well, if I'm going to keep giving out the advice, then I might as well make it something where I can help other people. But of course, this is a business. So, you know, $5.99 a month. It's not hard.
It's not free, but it's also not breaking the bank. People can afford it, and people can get in there. It's an interesting point you bring up there, and you brought it up on the podcasting for a living as well, is about focusing more on niche as opposed to kind of everything, because the competition is voluminous, right? You're going to run. Everyone is competing for that. You can't all become Joe Rogan. I'm sorry, Joe Rogan already exists. You can't. You're not going to be him. You're going to have to be something else. So
you can't be, and you're not going to be a comedian that's already got a base, and you're not going to be Conan O'Brien who already has a base, and you're not going to. Right. You see, that's the thing. The guys that are doing that have large bases, and they also have agents and connections to companies that based on their name are going to give them advertising. But if you're going to get into it, I think the key is to find the niche. It's to find a program that hits a specific audience that an advertiser or advertisers would want, because that's really the future. I mean, radio is dead. Radio's dead because of the fact that, and I'm not the only person that said this. I think most people who worked in radio will admit that it's dead or dying. Because now what you can do is you can find whoever you want to, who agrees with you the most personally, and you can subscribe to their pod, and everything's on demand. And you know, I think one of the things that radio people kind of miss, you know, at this point, if you're doing a 4-hour sports talk show, nobody, except maybe like 5 people who just love you so much that they wake up every day and wear your t-shirt, is listening for 4 hours.
Right.
If you look at some of these like breakdowns, like they say something at 3:00 and they never say it again for the next 4 hours. And they're not, I don't think that they're getting the idea that people take things in very small bites, and they take things that are very specific and they consume them in that way.
Right.
And that's what, and I think that's the future, because what I'm doing right now will be very different 10 years from now. But think about this. What do you think is more likely? People go back to consuming things like they did 10 years ago with radio programs, or people get even more like locked into little things and little niches and the things that they like they are now, and it's even more splintered 10 years from now? I'm planning for the more splintered. That's where I think it's going.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if it wasn't more splintered, if it wasn't more digging in on specific things you want. And you're thinking about this from a revenue standpoint, Chris, but I also think about it from you being a content expert standpoint. The narrower you get, the more focused you are on something specific. We could say the White Sox, but really it's a sliver of what the White Sox are. It's kind of what each individual podcast is a specialty in. And that's why some people listen to 3-4 different.
27 White Sox podcasts.
Well,
I don't think there's one team in professional sports that has more podcasts than the White Sox. Isn't that crazy?
It's
every 3 days.
It's insane. It's they look at all the idiots that are doing well and think, well, I'm smarter than them. I can do 5 too. I think that's what it is. But you're right about the nicheness, even from the expert side of it, right? Being able to break something down. You don't want the whole wide world. Sometimes you do in minor bits, because you'll get some conversation going on it. But really, for you to be an expert on something, you've got to focus in closer. So it's not only a revenue driver, but it's just a matter of, well, I can really spend my time on this, get good at understanding this, and then I give the value to the listener as well.
Well, look at even within the White Sox podcast world, the ones that are the most successful have something that is unique about them, right? Like what you do on the 108 is unique. You have a section in the ballpark.
Right, you can come see us.
you have this group of people that you've built a culture, especially online with Twitter, right? And then what that has allowed you to do then is to not just talk about the White Sox, but also all the different cultural things that you've kind of based it around and how do you watch things. And then that branches off into how you do your marketing. It branches off into how you do your sales with your merchandise and things like that. I'm not doing a show every day. And I get people who ask all the time, I really wish you would do them 4 days a week. Well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to recap games.
Right.
I want to give an overview of the team. In fact, one of the goals that I have when I do Sox in the Basement is that if I do mention something that happened in the last couple of days or over the last, week, it's not the whole show. The show should stay as evergreen as possible because every day something happens with your ball club.
Right.
And then it's established what we really think. I mean, we really are in a lot of ways like an anti-show. We don't worry about angering anybody. I mean, and that's not to say that there's anything wrong. Like Ed just did a show recently. Like some of you are doing podcasts for money. Some of you are doing podcasts because that's how you get into media. That's the new way. If you talk to people that are doing radio right now, we've had some guests on recently from the radio world who have said there's no such thing as interning anymore. There's no such thing as getting on at 2 a.m. You create your own brand to try to get hired by a media station. So there are people that are going to be like, all right, I'd love to say this, but I'm not going to say it because that's going to hurt my path into that. And there's nothing wrong with it. But everybody's got their own reason for doing the show and their own audience. We've kind of found what our audience is, and it's a certain brand to what we do. And then you have your audiences. And so even the White Sox thing, which is a specific fandom with a specific group of fans, splinters as well into what we're focusing on.
Absolutely. No, and you bring up a great point about the young up-and-coming new media people. I did listen to that episode by Ed, and it was very interesting. It was like, I'm totally not into any of this. I'm doing the podcast because I want an avenue for self-expression. And if we weren't getting paid to do it, I would still do it. But it is nice to get paid to do it, obviously, as kind of part of it. But everyone has a different goal in what they want to do. Some people are doing it for a career. I'm doing it because I got shit in my mind, and I want to put it out there and maybe people differ as to what they want to do with the podcast.
Well, I think everybody's got their different focus for it. Like to me, I love the Sox. Like I said, happy accident that I started doing Sox in the Basement. On the other hand, now it is a major part. I mean, it is the flagship of the entire network. It is equal to one of the other shows on the network in terms of its revenue. All right.
Okay.
But in terms of its listenership, it blows everything else out of the water. Okay, because just White Sox fandom, the amount of people that are listening for how long they're listening to, it's a crazy difference. Okay, so for me, like I had somebody the other day say, what if Jerry Reinsdorf sells the team or decides he's walking out the door because they want to move a team to Nashville, and after all of this, they're just going to end up in Nashville in 3 years? And I thought to myself, I think I'm going to Nashville then.
You follow him down there.
This is my business now. Like that's kind of how I guess I'm going to Nashville. It's a nice town. I'll go to Nashville. Tennessee's cool. You know,
Why not?
Scoot an hour north and get the Bourbon Trail in Louisville. Yeah, I can do that. Nashville sounds like fun. Like that's where my thought process is.
Yeah.
So people kind of maybe do it as a hobby or because they love the team, and that's how it started for me. But now, I mean, you mentioned the paywall. You know, Dominic Lanuti needs new skates for Brother Ice Hockey. That's
ain't free
sport in the world. So I mean, like this is what I do now, and it puts food on the table. And I'm very lucky that I'm able to do something I love, but still get paid to do it.
Absolutely. Let me get to this drink right here. White Sox Dom, he says, cheers to everyone. And Andrew Vaughn's walk-off 3-run homer. Absolutely. Yeah,
the rise of Andrew Vaughn going up the first base line. Like I saw a video, he's going up the first base line, and he's like got this look on his face, like, oh my goodness, we actually won, and I hit the home run. Like he was like a child. Like he was like a happy baby with that baby face as he was running around the bases.
It was the most slowest, beautiful home run trot ever. He took forever to go around the bases, and I was so happy he did. I was like, yes, enjoy every fucking second of this. Just get that all in, because it's been 2 weeks, and we've all been suffering through this, Andrew, and you finally got us over the hump here. You're the last one. You get the game-winning hit, so bless you. I'm happy he did that.
And Chris, I want go ahead. Adam Hazley, okay?
He even got on base when he struck out.
Here's Adam Hazley, who had a great game, who tied that game up, who steps in because Luis Roberts got another injury, and he took advantage of his opportunity at the top of the lineup to play well, and he should stay in the lineup because that's what they need to start doing. They need to start rewarding guys for play on the field, because what you were promised to be doesn't mean you should stay in the lineup every day. You should reward guys now. That's the only way to run this when you're, 8-21? I don't even look at it anymore. It's bad.
That's correct. Yeah, Chris, I want to pivot off of the Pay For podcast to something very specific from this podcast. You did a 2-part show about the art of the interview, and you went very deep on this. It's something I'm interested in as someone who's just learning how to interview. I've been doing a podcast now for almost 5 years, but I'm not the interview guy on my podcast. I'm like C2. I'm the analyst. I'm the one who comes in with a lot of the baseball-y talk, and then obviously we all jab jokes at each other. I'm 17 episodes now into the au jus and trying to learn how to interview. In your discussion, you brought up that you don't want to always stick to a list of questions. You want to be able to pivot, but I was listening closely. I didn't get the tidbits for a guy who's an idiot and doesn't have the flight miles of interviewing people. How can I get there faster than doing radio for 20 years? Give me the tip how I can shortcut a little bit of this and really get to the meat when I'm doing an interview.
Well, there was that 2-parter, which, by the way, it was a 2-parter because I was going on vacation, and so I needed to schedule out a bunch of shows in advance so I could skip down for a week and a half, and it turned into 2 weeks because we had to stop in West Virginia for a West Virginia funeral. That's a whole other show. I'll come back and tell you what that was like. That was a thing.
Damn.
But anyway, I also spoke with James Van Osel, I want to say, within the last month or so, and he talked a little bit about it as well. And the reason I bring that up is there isn't one way to do it. My most comfortable way of doing an interview may not be the way that you want to do it. JVO likes to write down questions. He says to himself, okay, well, then if I want to jump off of it, then I will, and I'm listening. And if that works for him, it works for him, right? Mm-hmm. On the other hand, doing live radio for years and years, just got to the point where I realized that writing down the questions, I was missing things. I was so concentrating on trying to get to the most, like my list, that I was skipping things.
Your focus was, how do I bridge to this next question I'm going to do, instead of just listening to whatever they're telling you and feeding off of it in some direction.
Yeah. So to me, when you're interviewing somebody, it really needs to get down to being a conversation. And if there's something you want specifically from them, there's no problem with writing a note down, and maybe they lead you right to what you want to get to. And then it's a very natural way of getting to it. So I avoid writing down my questions, and because of that, then I can kind of like go in whatever direction that I want to go in the interview. And sometimes you discover things about the guest that you would have never have gotten if you didn't leave an opportunity for them. Perfect example. I had a guy on just this week. It's sticking out in my head. Who's on this week's EP podcast at Evergreen Park. And he came in to talk about stuff going on in the village and events and things like that. But, and that should have been very easy. Like, what's next? What's going on with the parade? What's going on with such and such, right? I mean, that's first of all, I can rattle that, but I could have just used a list. I mean, I'm not expecting anything from it.
Sure, right.
At some point, he sits there and he makes he's talking about the different things, and I go, it'd be great because they're having a paint and sip, right? And he mentions his paint and sip, and he mentions like some of the other events like archery, and I'm like, it'd be great if you had a little sip in archery. And he's like, what?
Yeah, right.
If you let adults go out to the park and we could sip some wines or some craft beers and fire some arrows, that seems like an event that I could get behind if the village put that on.
Yeah,
now,
right.
He's thrown off by that because that's not an exact question, but he's
right.
And then he sits there and he goes, you know what? My dad was an archer. And I go, he was. And he tells me about how his father was like a championship archer who once split an arrow like Robin Hood in a competition.
No way.
He goes through the whole story, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, here's an interview that some people might have tuned out in. Like, oh, it's just the what's coming up for the next week type part. I'm going to skip ahead to get to the next thing. But instead, we get into this conversation, and there's some laughs, and that doesn't happen if I'm just going down my list. So to me, I there were a lot of things in that art of the interview that we're just touching on a part of it. And again, your style is your style, and I encourage you to talk to anybody who's given on-air interviews. Okay. But I think the on-air interview is going away. You don't hear the alternative radio DJ anymore on Afternoon Drive talking to Smashing Pumpkins. Do you?
Right. Yeah. It's bizarre. It's gone. It has disappeared. Yeah.
You don't even hear interviews mostly on morning radio anymore, unless it's like talk radio. So the interview is kind of going away. Podcasters are really becoming the interviewers. Yep. And so, like, in the end, my advice is it's okay to have a couple of things you want to hit on, but have the conversation. With a podcast, if it's not live, who cares if it's long-winded? Edit it at the end. Right?
Just got it down. Yeah.
Edit it at the end. Like, if I've talked too much and we've got out of hand, edit this down when you put the final thing up.
I mean, Chris, you know me. I don't give a shit. I would like to hear the whole thing. I like long form. I think there's still some of us out there that like long form. I know My Sox Summer and I are like the only two that I could think of. We're like, man, that thing was 3 hours long. I was so happy to hear, like, whatever, Dave Chappelle interview for 3 hours or Rick Rubin or whoever. Yeah, I listened to all 3 hours. Just like some people are into that shit. So, and sometimes some of the things you think is the meat might not be. Some people might really love some portion of the podcast that you cut. So I like to leave it if I could leave it.
That's an interesting point that I just want to follow up on. That's the thing. You have to be very critical of yourself. You have to learn to be very critical of yourself when you're editing afterwards, because you're right. The meat might not be what you think. And I think one of the tricks that will really you'll go far. You'll go far podcasting and with doing interviews or doing a show in any way, if you're able to edit yourself. Something you thought was really funny, right? You're like, man, I had a zinger there. That I am so funny. Okay. Sometimes you need to cut that because the other thing was better and it wasn't yours. Right. So it's okay to have a little bit of an ego, because of course you have to have a little bit of an ego.
You have to. Yeah.
Talk to people and not be afraid to do it. But every once in a while, you got to be a little critical of yourself too, and be like, you know what? That really gets long-winded, and all I'm playing it for is so I can get to the joke 3 minutes later. But the 3 minutes leading to it is so bad.
Sucks.
You have to be able to cut the whole thing. You do. You have to be mean to yourself sometimes when you're editing.
I appreciate that, because I am generally very critical of myself. And this dovetails nicely with my next thought here, because when I was listening to the art of the interview, I was thinking, a lot of people strive to have guests on shows. And I know in the early days of the 108 podcast, we would push to have guests, and we'd have different incentives for having a guest. We might have a guest like, let's say, White Sox Dave from Barstool. Before we knew him very well, it's like, oh, well, double the people are going to listen to our show than had listened, because he has a big following and all this stuff. And now we're out of the days of any of that. I mean, even when Jeff Passan was on, a lot of people listened, but it was not like, this is a life-changing moment as far as your podcast. Those people all went away after Jeff was gone. Like, it went back to the normal people that always listened to it. And so we've gotten to the point with 108 where we've gone through enough guests where we realize what guests are good fits for us and what guests are bad fits. Chris, do you have some of that where you're like, man, we chose this guest and it just didn't work out? And maybe you chose another guest that you're like, wow, that surprisingly they were great. Like, how do you go about guest selection, and how do you go about making sure you marry a topic with a guest so that they can perform as well as you want them to?
I do critique the outcome of guests. I do that. There are guests that I never brought back again, or maybe I tried him a second time. I was like, all right, this is cool. And I've had him reach out since then, like, hey, I can come on anytime. I'm like, all right, cool, keep you in mind. But like, I can see that the response isn't right. And I know that some people pick their guests because they say, well, this person has a lot of followers, so they'll put it out and that'll get people to listen. But that's fleeting in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And so I don't think that is as valuable as I thought it was a couple of years ago.
I would agree 100% with you. I think very early on in the podcast, there is a little bit to that because it'll get new ears on you. But at some point, you get into a level of maturity with your podcast. It doesn't do much of anything. Like like I said, even having Jeff passing on just didn't really. I mean, it was great for the people who are longtime listeners who thought it was hilarious. He came on and messed with us and all that stuff. But for long term, not so much.
Well, I mean, perfect example. So now we've been fortunate a couple times to get a player on for the White Sox show. Liam Hendricks coming on, or Jake Berger coming on, for example, or some of the minor league guys. Jimmy Lambert's been on the show. We've had a few people. It's cool to have a player on, but what I learned was if you give them the full half hour, it didn't seem to. I didn't get the same response in terms of listenership.
Yeah.
I mean, they only have so much to say. Right.
And they're baseball players, Chris. They don't talk all the time.
Right. They have to be entertaining too. Like Berger's entertaining. Like
he is. Yeah, he's fun.
That's why everybody tries to get him on the show, because he's a funny guy. When
he's actually funny. Yep.
He's fun to listen to. But I mean, like to me, I think the things that always I learned which type of guest made sense. It's people that have some sort of knowledge or inside talk about the team, or that people listen to their opinions and go, that guy's pretty smart. And you can kind of tell who those people are after you've been doing the show long enough. When I do the Evergreen Park podcast, I know that if the mayor comes in or a village trustee, I'm getting a bump because they're from the village and I can ask them a question, and they actually have been very nice to me. They don't care if I ask them something uncomfortable. Like
that's amazing.
Mayor of Evergreen Park has told me many times, Chris, I never want to know what you're going to ask me in advance, and you've tripped me up a few times, but you've always been fair. Okay. And and I take that as a compliment.
Yeah, you're in the trust, basically.
We get done at the end and I go, we okay? She's like, we're good. We're good. You got me on that one. Like she knows we did it. And like, right. Even with Southside Pod now, we've started to have a couple of different mayors and village officials on. And that seems to be the thing that that's one of the things that people have gravitated to. Like people also like the restaurant reviews on those. For some reason, they love hearing about some place that we went and ate. We always get huge response.
Oh, nice. That's good.
And the restaurants love it, and we love it. When we go to the breweries, things like that, where I sit down. And what's funny is there's no video. It's just me sitting there going, "Man, this is good." And somehow it translates. I don't know why. I really don't. Like I'm getting a free meal out of it, not you. But
right. That helps too.
but I mean, you learn which ones work. And there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, this got a better response than this, and then adjusting to it. The only advice I would give you, though, as a side to that is don't stare at your numbers so much as you drive yourself nuts. There's reasons why people don't listen. I am very aware that, there have been times where Sox in the Basement has dipped, but it's because the team has gone into a spiral and people need a week. They're like, I hate this team, and I'll see you in a week. They come back. Don't worry about it. I mean, we've had moments where on every show where there's a downturn, and it's either because of the holidays or it's because of a certain time of year or whatever. And you start to look at patterns, look at overall long-standing patterns. And when you're watching your numbers, as long as it looks like, like a mountain going up, it might dip. But if you look at where you were a year ago and say, I'm bigger than I was a year previously, you're doing a good job.
Stand back, zoom out a little bit, and not even from a number standpoint, Chris. I more think of it as after every 108 podcast, myself, Treasy, my Sox Summer, we have a meeting afterwards. Now, we've had a few cocktails, whatever, but we will talk about what we just did and what we think. And there are some shows, and we've had some substantial guests on after the show where we were like, that sucked. We either we didn't do a good job or the guest just wasn't ready or whatever. And then they're bad.
That's is bad, man.
Sometimes we sucked or they sucked or whatever. It just happens. And sometimes it'll be a guest that we weren't thinking a lot of, and we're like, man, were they good? And man, did we really like that conversation? And so sometimes it's not even about what is the end result? It's like they really fit well with what we were doing, or we had a better understanding of how to push the guest and get them to do it. Because sometimes I think if you're not, some guests need a lot of prodding. Some people we could turn the mics on and let them roll. and it just goes, So it depends on who it is and what you're trying to extract from people. But I just kind of wonder, because it's something that we battle with and we have battled with. Like, we'll go long stretches where we won't have a guest because we're like, well, there's no topic specific to a guest that we really want to entertain. It's just going to be the three of us and do it.
There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, and here's the funny thing. People assume that funny people, where their job is funny, will be good guests. Comedians is a great example of this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Comedians are the hardest guests you're ever going to interview. They are the hardest. I mean, I have them on every once in a while. I think the last comedian I had Ken Garr, who's a Southside comedian who was on Southside Pod maybe about a month or two ago. Nice guy, right? Mm-hmm. But I even said it in the interview. You guys are tough because you're already funny and you're very quick. And if I'm not prepared for your interview, you're either going to lose interest in me because you think I'm a loser, okay, who doesn't know what he's doing, or you're gonna start picking on me. You're gonna start, because that's what you enjoy doing. They are probably the scariest thing in the world to talk to is a stand-up comedian. They are the hardest people to have, and they probably are the ones I prepare for more than anything. Okay. Like, I don't write very much down. A stand-up comedian, I'll sit there and be like, all right, what did they do recently? How do I say this? Like, I do a little bit more prep for them because they are the most frightening people that you have to go and talk to. But the thing is, just because they're funny for a job doesn't mean they're going to be entertaining on your show. A lot of the duds that I had in live radio and in podcasting have been stand-up comedians or people that did comedy television shows. It turns out that when they're acting, they're on stage, they're a different personality when maybe they're sitting in front of the microphone with you.
Sure.
So you can't really rely on them. And I mean, my worst interview ever, the person I hated interviewing the most was Howie Mandel. He was an absolute jerk, and I don't think that. I know he goes on every once in a while and talks about all of his problems, like it's supposed to be the fact he's a jerk, but he's a jerk. Okay. And in the end, like, we got about 20. Well, we didn't get 20. We got 3 minutes into the interview, and I had been told before the interview, don't ask him about Bobby's World. He never wants to talk about it again. I was told by his agent, don't ask him about Bobby's World. He's done with that show. Don't ask him about it. But every time I asked him a question, it was a one-word answer. So, Howie, you're going to be doing this thing with the pieces and blah, 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 and whatever. And he's like, yes. That's all he said. Like, uh-huh. And I, like, after about the third one, I was like, well, this interview's toast. And it was live radio. So at that point, like, it's either just admit defeat or try to find something that is good for the listener. So I go, hey, Howie, you think you can do Bobby's voice from Bobby's World for us? And he loses it. Just loses it. He starts swearing on live radio. He calls me a motherfucker, like he's yelling. He hates my guts. Hey, F you this. And like, we're trying to keep up with the police. We just gave up at that point. Okay. And then he hangs up the phone on me and everybody's laughing. And at least it saved the interview for me.
Right.
Like, I mean, like, and that's okay. I mean, like, I kind of saw it as it was your fault you didn't come in and answer questions. But that's the thing with an interview. They're not all going to be good. And, you have to understand when it's time to cut bait, change the subject, try something new to kind of pry them out of their little box where they're not saying anything. Or, You know what? It's done. If it's
just cut them. Just
a 4-minute interview. Move on.
Yeah, good. Yeah, or goodbye. I mean, I think about it too from the context of being on someone else's show and getting a chance to guest on there, which in the little White Sox podcast group, I do get to guest on people's shows. And because of my experience with that on the 108 podcast, I always try to make sure I have something extra for whatever if I know a little bit about what we're going to talk about, I try to bring my own stuff just in case so that I never feel like the thing slows down. I always have a little extra with them. And so that I'll get invited back as a good guest. Not that I necessarily, I'm busy already, but if I want to keep a good relationship there. And so if you want to be a guest on someone's show, think of it from that perspective too. You want to be entertaining and you want to bring a bunch of stuff to it. Don't just sit there and wait for them to drag you out as well.
And here's the other thing. And I probably said it earlier. I'm going to say it again. It takes a long time to figure it out. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. Okay. I always kind of laugh like with this whole world, right? Sox in the Basement has me in a world where there's other White Sox podcasts and some of them are ex-Chicago sports people. They've been in the business here in this market, one of the largest markets in the country, for years. They have no idea who the hell Chris Lanuti is because he didn't do radio here, right?
Right.
Like, and what I did was a long time ago, and my experience is different from theirs. And but I made a lot of mistakes, just like I'm sure they made mistakes when they were doing things, and you find your own style. And so, like, it's okay to listen to a lot of what other people do. And I will tell you this, I picked up a lot of my interviewing style watching people who I thought were good at giving interviews. Okay. David Letterman was good at giving interviews. It wasn't even radio, but he was good at giving interviews. He knew when to ask a question, when to get goofy, when to change the subject, but I watched him a lot. He was very good at doing interviews. There were people on the radio who I enjoyed how they gave interviews. And I latched on to those that I liked, and I listened to their style. And it's the same. That's probably how I figured out how I was going to talk on the air. And that evolves. That evolves as I do this. That is constantly evolved, because not only do I pick up more, but I will hear somebody else do something and I'll be like, that's good delivery. I like that. It's okay to take little things off of other people.
Right.
Really, how you're going to learn is to do that. The only thing I say don't do is don't have a podcast that's just like mine and then see me interview a guy and 3 days later book the same guy and put him on your show. Don't do that. It's not the same thing. It's happened before, Beef. It's happened.
I believe it, my friend. It's okay to be a little un poquito derivative, but not the whole copying the whole thing.
There was a point a couple years ago, and I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but there was a point a couple years ago where I had 3 straight weeks of 3 different guests, and another show put on the same guest 3 days later every time. And the third week, when it happened the first 2 weeks, the third guy I was having on was on my show. And I said, hey, did you get contacted by so-and-so? Yeah, I got contacted today. I'm like, yeah, because I put out a tweet that said you were coming on my show. And he told the person what was happening, and they refused the interview because they thought, they were like, I'm not, then I won't go on the show.
That's ridiculous.
What happened? I understand if you make a mistake once, right? I don't expect to know my guest schedule.
Sure.
But like 3 weeks in a row, like I've seen it before. So you know what? Take a little bit and style and learn some things. Don't try to do the same show.
That's great. Great tip. Let me get to a couple drinks here. Soglo Sox fan says, good stuff, guys. Cheers. Thank you, Soglo. Saw him at the ballpark. He was out there freezing his nuts off with the rest of us.
Are you refilling as we're doing this?
No, I refilled a little bit once. It's
because it feels like that's never going down.
I'm taking tiny sips. Well, because I know that's all I got left. I can't. You're not chugging it, Chris. Come on.
Well, I don't know how to drink it unless it's fast.
I
got a little problem. I don't know if you know that.
Well, me too, just in different ways. Baloney says, I can listen to you two talk shop for days. Cheers. Thank you, Baloney. Appreciate you. All right, real quick before I let Chris go, I want to get a couple of Sox things in here. Not that we, I'm rejoicing after the victory, but it's still very downtrodden right now.
It's one.
That's one in a row.
The tickets. Okay, it's one.
Dog day on Tuesday, everyone. See you at the ballpark. Chris, for this White Sox team,
what player send you something after you do that?
No.
Does Uncle Brooks reach out?
We're just having fun with it. I just have fun. We do try to push people to go to the ballpark, but it's not for the White Sox. It's to come hang out in the section and have fun with us. Like, it's nice when people we haven't seen in a little bit. You were out there, yeah. I talked to you and Ed for a couple innings. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Glassy-eyed. I don't know if everybody from the 108 remembers me being there.
I had a few cocktails that day. I'm not gonna lie about that. I was a little tuned up, but yeah. It's more for our benefit that people will come to and hang out in the section and hang out, and we'll have some new people come through and talk to some people we haven't seen. It's good to connect.
Comment down there. This should be in a podcasting 101 class. Throw that up there on the screen real quick.
There you go.
You're right. And Beef has already been a guest. You can subscribe to Podcasting for a Living, where these conversations happen once or twice a week, and there's a huge backlog of all these different things about how you make money, and how you create and how you name your podcast and how you get it distributed and the interviewing and everything else like that. It's all available through Spotify. Subscribe. Okay. And if you go and subscribe for $5.99 and you consume all those shows and then you unsubscribe, because that's what I do with my Netflix, I won't be mad at you.
Okay. There is a link And the YouTube, to go to the broadcast basement, you can find all of Chris's podcasts there. Make sure you go get to that. But yes, this is worth $5.99, even if you don't make your own podcast, just to see how the sausage is made, just to understand how these things work. Everyone loves a little inside talk on stuff. And yes, I've been a featured guest on here. I did 15 minutes spilling some beans about how the 108 does business, which we generally don't do on our own podcast.
I know. I felt like I was dragging out secrets, man. Did you get?
I loved it though. I loved it. There's more back there if you ever need me in a couple months.
Did they know that did they hear everything you gave away on that show?
I told them. I don't think they care. Treasy and my Sox Summer, they're just like, fuck you. I'm not interested in whatever you're talking about. Mrs. Beef says, I remember you and Ed saying hi, Chris. So my wife claims to not have been drunk enough to have forgotten that you guys were there. I don't believe her. I'm not sure.
I remember saying hi.
All right, let's talk some White Sox real quick and we'll get out of here. Chris, I want to ask this question. I've been trying to ask this question of a lot of people. What aspect of this slow start is bothering you the most?
And it was so predictable. I mean, I'm sorry. It was so predictable. Like here, I wanted them to jump out to a quick start. I said on the show they had to get out on a quick start. I wanted to see this team come in and prove to me that it was all just the old man who was the manager, because that's what I wanted. Yeah. But it was so predictable. I mean, we said it at the end of the year on our show, like repeatedly. We pounded on the bar and we yelled it. Like, this team isn't built right. And this is a disaster. They never went out and finished their build. Not a rebuild. I won't call it that. Ed's got me now on that, where he won't call it a rebuild. And he's pointed out enough times, like, this team is way too old to tell me that they just had a rebuild. And he's right.
Yeah, okay. Age fast.
But that was the thing. It was too predictable that it could fall apart. There were so many questions. You needed, think about all the things you needed to have happen. You needed Yasmani Grandal to come back and play regular. You had to have Eloy Jimenez stay healthy and become a guy who's going to hit 45.
It was quite a parlay. I mean, Treasy and I will make the parlay because we big gambling guys. We'll make the parlay thing. It's tough there.
Look at the staff. You need the staff to start going deeper into games. You need Michael Kopech to develop. You need Lance Lynn to not only be healthy, but not slide off anymore, because he is getting towards the end of his career. Right. You need Mike Clevenger to be a reclamation project similar to Johnny Cueto. Right. And there were
tall timber. So
many things you needed to have happen. You needed Elvis Andrus's one good month over several years that you witnessed last year. What he was going to do this entire year. So that's the thing. I think the thing about them not playing well, there were a few games in there they could have won. Things went bad. Yeah. Liam Hendrickson there as a closer probably wins a couple of those games. But overall, we're kind of fortunate as White Sox fans, because even with that, we'd be floundering and we'd be trying to convince ourselves they could get back into it.
It would be, yes, we'd have way more hope, even though we probably shouldn't have that hope.
But I think what happened with this start is that it really showed most of us that our deepest fears were true. And it sucks, but it's true. I mean, they're not built properly. They are not a contending team. They could never win a World Series with the way that they're constructed. When they didn't go out and get Manny Machado or Bryce Harper, that should have been the first indication this wasn't a serious organization. And they've never been serious since. And their window's closed. Next year they got too many guys coming off. You gotta remake this, and somebody else should be doing it.
Yeah, you would need a real GM to put the players in place that could make this a division winner again next year as the contracts roll off. I want to push back.
To be done next year, and I don't think these guys can do it. They can't pull off a trade of any kind of meaning unless it's meaningful for the team that gets Fernando Tatis.
I was gonna say they can't even do a deadline deal, Chris. No. In 2022, they're 3.5 games back, and I know everyone hated Tony, but you're still in striking distance. They got Jake Diekman.
Listen, Pete. There's nothing but accountability in there. There's no shortage of accountability.
I do want to push back, though, a little bit on the predictability, because no one saw it going as bad as it's going right now. I wish there had been people out there saying it like, man, this is going to be an avalanche. There's going to be because we're all apprehensive, and we're either on one side of it. We were on the side of it's not enough, they ain't going to make it, or they might be able to make it, but all felt like it was baselined around the 81 and 81 that the old man got the year before. I don't think we saw the crater coming that's manifested itself in month one.
I think you're right about the fact we didn't see the crater coming, but I'm also not shocked. There hasn't been a moment where I've sat there and said, "How did this happen?" right? Like I didn't know
Right.
it was possible.
You're looking around, you're like, oh, these.
It's more like I shrug and go, well, they suck. Like, I mean, I just got to do this a lot. Like, oh, they suck. Like my kids come into the room and they're like, what's going on? They suck. Like,
That's it.
like, oh, that is terrible. Why are they terrible? And then I list a few things, and then they get tired of listening to me say it over. Like I start listing the 50 different reasons why they suck. And they walk out at about reason number 12, and I just keep talking to myself until I realize they're not in the room anymore. That's how the conversation goes.
Chris, let's say you want to be optimistic about this team. Like the Beefloaf, I'm a glass half full guy generally, even though I've never cared for Rick Hahn.
Well, that's your role on your show, and that's good podcasting. You should have.
I'm just not
the same thing. Nobody will like it.
I'm just not I'm generally not a screamer, and I'm not a big complainer about stuff. I will complain low key. Especially if everyone likes something, then I'm really like, that's why we were on Hahn early, because the people fucking loved Hahn. And we were like, fuck this doesn't look right. We only dive in really hard if we feel like someone's getting unjust praise. I feel like in one of waiters. That's when we push that direction. But let's say I want to be optimistic. Where's the upside on this roster, Chris? Find me some upside in this roster that hasn't happened yet, that I could look forward to the next couple months and say, this player or this thing could go right for us.
Well, like right now, what I'm noticing are the guys that are putting in the best at bats. And to me, that translates into the most maximum effort. The guys that are getting on the field and are healthy and ready to play. And that when given an opportunity, are taking that opportunity the best they can. They may not be perfect, but I do see good at bats. I see good at bats from Andrew Vaughn. Yep. I see Andrew Benintendi, even with his flaws early on, at least trying to have good at bats out there and playing the style of baseball that his manager wanted him there for. I don't know if he'll pan out the way that you want him to, but to me, a guy making $75 million over 5 years, there are a lot of Major League Baseball teams that pay that for just slightly above average players. I think we look at that and go, well, he should be a superstar. And right. No, that's just the going rate for an everyday ball player who's going to go through slumps like anybody else and might get off to a slow start. I don't blame this on him. Right. I am curious as to whether or not you could see a guy like an Adam Hazley just all of a sudden like take his opportunity.
Like pop.
Good spring. He had a pretty good spring, and he played well down in the minor leagues, and he has a pretty good pedigree. So that's interesting to see. Like, does he become something interesting out there? I'm not giving up on Oscar Colas, but you can't really develop a rookie when he's surrounded by crap. Like
it's tough. Yep.
Come up and run everything. If this team was hitting on all cylinders, I bet you he'd be doing better. But when you come up and you're pressing because you think all of a sudden, as a guy who just got to the majors, you got to do everything, that's bad for you. So I guess I'm watching the guys that are putting in effort. I'm very curious about Jake Berger. I would, he's going to get a long look, I think, at third base because I wouldn't bring Yoan Moncada back till he was ready. I don't want to listen to any more. My back hurts. And we brought him back, but he's not going to be 100%. So that's why he's going to be 203. Well, then don't bring him back. No,
I did scream about this before the season that Jake Berger should have been on that opening day roster. There are a lot of uses for him, even if he's not going to start. Like he can hit.
On my opening day roster when we said that who should have made it. He was on yours. I think anybody. You know what? Here's the problem: the guys evaluating the talent and put the team together don't make very good decisions, and they have done it for many years, and that's why they shouldn't be there anymore. But I'm looking at Jake Berger and I'm saying to myself, all right, Jake, right now, you may not be the greatest defender, but you're not killing us, and you're really hitting the ball well. And let's see what he does in a couple of months, because I think that's what he's going to get. So I guess that's what I'm watching. I would love to see Dylan Cease pitch longer into games. I'm not as concerned about Lucas Giolito. It's his contract year. He's going to pitch great. He's going to make a ton of money with somebody else next year.
I was going to say, he's looked good so far, and you're right. He's going to be on some other team.
Look great. If only every year was Lucas Giolito's walk year. Imagine how good he was. But other than that, that's about it. I've really lost faith in Michael Kopech. I'd love to say, I'm waiting to see if he can turn around and become a starter for us. I'm not sure if he is. Okay.
You think that ship might be sailed at this point?
Yeah, I really do. And so that's going to be the biggest problem next year. You're going to have Dylan Cease and nothing else. And so I think at some point you got to at least find out what you got in the minor leagues. I really do. I think there's got to be, I think Davis Martin should already be up here. And I think that, Seth Burke should be up here at some point. Sean Burke.
Sean Burke, yeah.
Sean. Yeah. Okay. Even Jesse Schultens. I got that name right.
Yeah, he looked decent when they brought him up and used him in long relief. He's a starter by trade. Bring him up. Let's see what he's got.
I'm okay with giving these guys an opportunity. I think Kopech's spot in the rotation is kind of wasted, and he would give you a boost in the bullpen. And there's plenty of guys who are high end, highly ranked prospects who become very good 1 to 2 inning relief pitchers that make really good careers and are a plus for their organization. He'd be more of a plus for this organization coming out of the bullpen than what he's doing on the mound. Okay. The only reason the White Sox are trying to force him into that position is because not having him in that rotation further exposes the shortcomings of the front office.
That's right.
and of Chris and everybody who's developing in the minor leagues.
Couldn't disagree with any of what you just said right there. Chris, thanks so much for bestowing your knowledge on the art of the interview. Good and bad guests, as well as your current barometer on the White Sox. Remember, on this show, we aren't trying to be right. We're just trying to understand. You have anything else you want to plug or replug? Feel free to plug away right now.
Well, I don't know how many podcasters we have, but podcasting for a living, go ahead and subscribe to that through Spotify. If you have any questions, by all means, hit me up in the DMs on any of the social medias. I will talk. I don't charge you. If you're like, hey, Chris, how do I do this? I'll tell you. I'm not a complete jerk. Okay. I'm not like, hey, that'll be $5. You can send it to my PayPal account. Like, I'm not going to, okay. But
I can vouch for it. It's not shady. There's a real product there at the end.
And, you guys all know about Sox in the Basement just as much as I know about the 108. And here's the thing: if you want to follow a team that's going to have fun this year but going to fall apart at some point because they're at the beginning of their build, you could follow Bucks in the Basement. Ben Cherington's doing an awful lot as general manager with nothing because he walked in and he cleaned house in a lot of ways with their development and everything, and he modeled the way he was doing things after the Tampa Bay. And it's working, surprisingly. Who would have thought? If only we could get guys that thought like that, and then we could use Jerry's money positively. I mean, with the payroll they have, that'd be great. And then, of course, if you're a Southsider, check out Southside Pod. Right now, it's the show that I laugh on the most, and I really do enjoy it. And we just had the Battle of the Southside, which Blue Island won.
Okay.
Yes, it wasn't. I didn't steal it from the 108 tourney. I promise.
Look, here's the way you gotta look at it.
From one of my co-hosts on the show, and he said it on the microphone because I was all the way in the bag. We actually recorded the evening of St. Patrick's Day, and he brought in this grid, and he's like, "What if we had a battle of the South Side?" And then I talked to my social media person. She's like, "I could run the heck out of this," and I was like, "All right, let's do it." And then as I was doing it, I was like, "Am I ripping off the 108 tournament?"
No, you are not. No,
that's what I was most.
No. See. Tournaments and drafts and those types of things, they're for the streets, okay? It depends on what you do with them yourself. Now, if someone wants to try to run a tournament at the same time as we're doing it, we'll slaughter you. So it's a bad idea. But otherwise, in a different avenue, of course, bang away, baby.
I won't tell you about how my social media person says we have to start this at the same time as the NCAA tournament. No.
Here we go. Now we'll be.
What other tournaments going on at the same time?
Now we'll be fighting. Chris, thanks so much for coming on. We got to catch up soon outside of here. Take care, brother.
Yeah, man. Let's get a beer at the game.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, guys. Thank you for having me on.
That was Chris Lanuti. I love Chris Lanuti. No guest this next week. I'm taking Monday off. We're going to be in Cincinnati. We're going to be doing the hashtag 108ing road trip, us and Sox Machine, and a bunch of you. I think I'm hearing 150 to 200 people are going to go down to Cincinnati. We're going to go down there and party and everything. So the Monday afterwards, I'm taking the day off. I'll be back on Monday, May 15th, and I'll line up a guest for then. I just want to thank Chris Lanuti again. My man, thanks to all the 108 families up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like button, commenting. Of course, the drinks and tips. We'll see you on the 108 podcast on Thursday. Go out to the ballpark. Come see us. See us for Dog Day. Love you guys. Take care. Bye.